Good morning.
How are you doing, guys?
Doing great. What about yourself?
I'm fine. I'm fine. Fine. Maharsh, as always. I guess you had a break, right? 1 week immersion, maybe, but
Yes, yes.
coup-
1 week immersion and then 1 week to study for exams.
yeah, yeah. So, I know it's tough. I know it's tough, but at least without classes, right? Here it was three um, tough weeks because all the professional stuff, and we have this emergency phase here in São Paulo, which took out the children from the schools. It's a bit bad for the ones that have young babies at home, but everything's fine. At least we are healthy and good. Well, we are while people are getting into the class, I see that we have just few people yet, but I will just start this class today making a recap on what we've seen before this break and what we have ahead of us to the end of this course. Okay. Well, guys, this first part of the course we've attacked, we've approached the main topics on procurement. We've gone from the basics of procurement, discussing a bit about trust and types of contracts, quality management, and so on. And we are getting to this moment where we're uh, gonna approach not in a very deep way because this is not a full supply chain finance course, but we're gonna approach in the next three classes how we link procurement management and financial solutions for our supply chains. Okay, so this is what I'm gonna discuss. I'm gonna present. I'm gonna propose a discussion for you in this class today and in the two classes that we have in the next 2 weeks. Okay, let me open here our syllabus because it is important to highlight for you guys that we have in the second part of the course our group presentations. Okay, let me just open here and then we talk about this more precisely. Let me share my screen. All right, here we go. Okay, I imagine you are guys having my screen. Let me just make sure.
Yes, professor. We can see it.
Fine. Ba-da-dum.
Recording in progress.
Okay. Well, this is our syllabus. Let's go directly to the schedule. Today's schedule. Let's see here. Schedule. There we are. Look, guys. As I was saying, today we're gonna have the basics of supply chain. I'm gonna make a basic approach on what is supply chain finance, okay, or finance. What is supply chain finance? And we're gonna be. Sorry, let me just go back here my headset because the battery is dead. In the next
two classes, we also going to have discussions on supply chain finance. We're going to discuss some strategies downstream and upstream the supply chain, where we have Brazilian solutions, where we can use banks or other financial institutions to finance, for example, our suppliers or our customers or clients. Okay.
Professor, we can hear you. Can't.
Set Bluetooth off. Power off.
No, Professor. It's very muffled.
Your headset isn't connected, Professor.
Set Bluetooth off.
Can you hear me now, guys? Yeah. Nope.
Yes.
Yeah, now it's good.
Battery is dead, so I have to connect to using. I don't know exactly where you guys could hear me, but let me get a little bit back again. Today we're gonna discuss the basics of supply chain finance. I'm gonna provide you an introduction on what is financing supply chains, how we could finance supply chains, and why we have strategies within supply chain management that are important for us to be used to finance customers or to finance, for example, suppliers. Okay, we're gonna go deeper on these basics on what is supply chain finance. Next week, we're gonna discuss some strategies that we have here in Brazil and worldwide, because what we use here in Brazil is also widely used in other countries. Some strategies where we can finance our customers and our suppliers using different partnerships with banks and with other types of financial institutions. Lastly, in the third class on this, we're going to discuss basically the role of securitization in supply chain finance. What is securitization and why it is important for certain companies to use this financial tool available at the capital market to finance suppliers or customers. So we're gonna hear in these next three classes, guys, mix a little bit of not a little bit, actually we're gonna mix, we're gonna make a very deep blended discussion on supply chain management, procurement, and finance from a practical perspective. We're going to discuss what we have here in Brazil in terms of supply chain finance tools to help firms and to help supply chains to finance themselves. Okay. And sorry, I have a fourth class here on May 4th, where we're going to discuss the role of supply chain finance in the non-current asset investments. I mean, when I want to invest in a warehouse, for example, or a distribution center, an asset, what are the alternatives that I have at my disposal here in Brazil to make the investment without hurting my balance sheet? We're going to discuss this beginning of May. From the class 11 onwards, we're gonna have the presentations. Then I will handle my the space for you guys, and then you are going to be the lecturers, the professors in those next classes. You're gonna each of you within your group will present case 1, case 2, case 3, and case 4. It's not gonna be a simple, of course, not gonna be a simple presentation. Okay. The idea here is you guys to present what you have, and I will support you with questions and with comments in order to make the things more dynamic. And of course, this is open for everybody. Actually, everybody needs to read all the papers, not only the paper of which was assigned to your group. Everybody needs to read all the papers because you need to deliver a summary of each paper, even if you are not in the group that will make the presentation that day. And because if you read, you can contribute in the discussions. Okay. All the 4 papers are deeply related to everything that we've seen above, okay, until class number 10. Let me get here one question. Okay, Juliana is just making a comment to you guys on the case number 2. Okay, this is the idea here, guys. And we didn't have a midterm exam, but we're gonna have a final exam in a date to be assigned by coordination in the proper moment. Okay, we're gonna have a final exam that will approach all the content of the course. Don't get concerned. I mean, it's important for you, of course, to get concerned, but the idea here is not to make a Q&A exam. I will not post questions to you to get from you answers exactly how it is on the materials or on the papers that I provide to you. The idea here will be much more to you to write a essay, general essay. You've written essays for each topic up to now. And the idea here is to you guys to write a final essay approaching everything that you saw, bringing your insights on what you understood from the full content, trying, of course, to connect one content to another. Okay, 3-4 pages. All right. Fine, guys. So let's get started with the basics of supply chain finance. Supply chain finance. Let me get here the presentation. Another comment for this class today and for the next 3 classes, all the classes that we're going to have on supply chain finance, you will not have prior materials to be read, so you don't have any essay to be prepared. The focus here is that you to pay attention and to participate on the discussions on supply chain finance in the next 4 classes, and to use the free time that you have, that you would use, for example, to prepare the essays that you've prepared in the first part of the course, to prepare your presentations, group presentations, and to read all the 4 papers. All the 4 papers are available for you here in the tab cases. Case number 1, Apple Inc., number 2, number 3, and number 4. Again, it is important for all of you guys to read all the papers, okay, for your formation and for your participation during the discussions, the group discussions class by class. Okay, Okay, let's move forward. Content, basics on supply chain finance. Basics on supply chain finance. Well, guys, for us to understand what is supply chain finance, first we need to understand the problems that the firms in general within a supply chain face when they are participating, where they are dealing, they are managing their business within the supply chain. Okay. Let me be more detailed on that. We're going to approach in these today. Actually, we're going to approach today 5 main topics. We're going to make an introduction on supply chain finance. We're going to talk about the concept of cash-to-cash lead time. We're going to make an assessment on what's the impact of cash-to-cash lead time, or what's the relation between cash-to-cash lead time and financial statements. What are the traditional sources of cash for a firm, for a supply chain? And then we're going to conceptualize supply chain finance. You've seen already that this is a workflow showing a supply chain. As you know, any type of supply chain has several participants, several firms that together work to deliver products or services to a final customer. So we have suppliers, we have manufacturers, plants, we have distributors, we have retailers, and we have customers. This is a very general, right? Supply chain. And they interact in the format of networks between or among themselves. Okay. Here within the supply chain, we have certain flows like information flow. We have information flowing from customers and final customers to suppliers. With this information, all the stages in the supply chain can understand what they should provide, what's the demand that the customer have in relation to that supply chain. Supply chains also have a flow of products that generally goes from upstream supply chain to downstream supply chain. The goods are produced and are added value stage over stage until they reach the final customer. And we have cash flow, money flowing from downstream supply chain to upstream supply chain. Of course, final customer pays, for example, the store, which pays the retailer, which pays the distributor, which pays the manufacturer, and which pays the supplier. This is, in a very basic way, is how a general supply chain works. Let's focus for a while, guys, in this flow here, money flow. It is easy to understand that the money will not flow exactly in the same time as the products go towards the customer. What I mean is, you have here among the several stages of the supply chain, bargaining power that will dictate how products will flow and how cash will flow back to the suppliers. In other words, as the stronger, for example, the buyer is in relation from a bargaining power perspective, the stronger the buyer is in relation to the supplier, higher will be, for example, the impositions that this buyer will make to the supplier in order or related to payments. In other words, we can have, for example, a buyer that is very big, is the most important firm. For example, let's say that the distributor, or better, let's say that the retail stage of the supply chain is the strongest segment in this supply chain. Let's imagine that we've discussed this in the first part of the course. If you remember global gap, the relation between retailer and small farmers that produce fruits and vegetables, etc. Let's imagine that we have this scenario, which is very typical. Retailers in this supply chain have concentrate all the bargaining power. They concentrate the bargaining power. So they dictate to the suppliers when they want to receive the product and how they will pay. How they will pay. Eventually, those guys receive products in D0 in the first day, and they will just disburse money. They will pay back the suppliers in D plus 60 days, for example. And then we can understand that those guys need to raise money to support this period in which they don't have any cash inflow. This is the drama of any supply chain. The guys that will discuss the first case on Apple will see that one of the strategies at Apple is to finance the suppliers. As Apple has a strong balance sheet, strong cash flow, what they do to tie the suppliers to them, they provide cash, they finance the suppliers, they finance equipment, they make advanced payments, and in that way they tie the suppliers, they make the supplier fully dependent of them, of Apple. So arbitration, cash management within the supply chain, I will use another term. Cash engineering within supply chain is an important tool, an important weapon to manage procurement, to manage logistics, to manage sales. If you understand what are the financial tools available for you to finance your customers and to finance your suppliers without harming too much your balance sheet, you may take competitive advantages against your competitors. And this is what we're gonna talk about in the next following classes. When I mentioned to you guys this relation between a stronger partner in the supply chain dealing with a weaker partner within the same supply chain, and then I told you now that this guy received the product in D0 and pays in D60, putting this guy here in trouble because he has costs to be paid day over day, and they need, those guys here, they need cash to pay those costs. If he doesn't have any cash inflow, he needs to leverage money from someone else. This is an issue that this guy faces when he is dealing with a stronger partner. When he is dealing with a partner that have all the bargaining power on his behalf. To this period, guys, in which, or to this period in which the money flows from one partner to another within supply chain, we name cash to cash lead time. Cash to cash lead time is the time that a firm, the whole time that a firm have from the moment in which this firm makes all the disbursement related to costs and expenses to produce a certain type of product or good, until the moment it receives the cash from the customer. This period between disbursement to production until cash inflow got from payments from the customer is named cash to cash lead time. Cash to cash lead time. We can have shorter cash to cash lead times, and we can have longer cash to cash lead times. The concept of lead time, not cash to cash lead time, but just lead time, is a very typical concept within the field of operations and supply chain management. Lead time is a very important concept within operations and supply chain management. But the concept of lead time is much more linked to the customer perspectives. For example, when Amazon says, hey, I will deliver in São Paulo from today onwards products in the same day. Probably you've seen these in the news last week. Amazon is proposing to public that live in São Paulo that they will deliver products in the same day. If you request a product in the morning, it is high the probability to you to receive this product in the same day, in the end of the day. This period between the moment you click to buy something at Amazon website and the moment that you deliver, that you receive the product from Amazon is named lead time. Período de entrega, lead time. This is from the customer perspective. So I am the customer. For me, what matters is how many hours or days or weeks I will take to receive the product that I bought. Concept of lead time. Concept of lead time. Traditional concept of lead time. But now I'm bringing to you the supplier's perspective of lead time. And what is important for suppliers when they are supplying certain product to a customer? The cash-to-cash lead time, the cash-to-cash cycle. Of course, he wants to deliver the product per se in the shorter time possible. But for this guy here, as a business, he's looking for receiving the cash as soon as possible. As soon as possible. Again, to this period between, to the elapsed time from cash disbursement to the supplier to cash inflow coming the customers, I give the name of cash-to-cash lead time or cash-to-cash cycle. It is a synonym for that. And this is not simple to manage. This is not simple to manage. Longer cash-to-cash cycles is not something simple to be managed. I had a boss not long time ago, very close one. He became a friend. He hired me like 12 years ago when I was training for the first time for a company. And he used to say, he's very funny, and he used to say, you know what's the secret of any type of business? And then I said, I don't know, cost, price. I tried to provide, I mean, risk management. I tried to provide like standard answers. And he said, no, cash to cash lead time, cash to cash cycle. The secret is to receive from customer first in advance, preferably, and to pay your suppliers at term. Could you understand that? If I get money from my customers in advance, let's say I will sell you something, and I tell you, hey, I will deliver the product to you in 100 days, but I need to receive full payment now, 100 days before I deliver. Then I get 100% payment from you, my customer. At the same time, I negotiate with the suppliers that I need in order to manufacture the project that I have to provide you. I negotiate with my suppliers saying, hey guys, I need to pay you, I need to receive the raw material, the inputs now, but I need to have a payment term of 150 days. So while I'm getting money from my customer 100 days before shipment, I am paying my suppliers 150 days after receiving the goods. In this case, I have payment cash inflow in D plus 100 days, and I have cash outflow D plus 150 days after the setting of the contract. Let's say that we're talking about a sale of 1 million reais. So I will receive 1 million reais, and I will work with this 1 million reais for 50 days until I have to pay my suppliers. This cash, 1 million reais in this scenario that I am proposing to you, this cash will be in my balance sheet, in my pocket for 50 days before I need to make this disbursement to my supplier. This close friend used to say, hey, this is the secret of any business, and this is indeed the secret of any business, mostly in environments in which we have high risk and high interest rates like Brazil. In this scenario here that I'm presenting to you, I don't have any need in this specific business. I don't have any need of cash from anybody, because I'm getting financed by my customer and by my supplier. My supply chain is financing me. So I'm reducing my cash to cash lead time here to a negative counting. 100 minus 150 is minus 50, means that my cash to cash lead time is negative, it's not positive. So I have cash in my pockets coming from my supplier, sorry, from my customer, and I'll work with this money 50 days until I need to make any disbursement to my suppliers. Of course, this is not possible for anybody. Now that I discovered that this is the secret of business administration, I need to understand that it is not possible to simply apply this at any scenario. Because everybody knows that. Every CFO knows that. Every CEO knows that. What I need to understand is that where I am in within my industry. Of course, you've seen this figure before, so I will not develop any deeper comment on that, but this is the 5 competitive forces of Porter, or the elements of industry structure, that shows how buyers and suppliers relate themselves considering the forces that form the industry. In other words, guys, in other words, in order to us to have a scenario that I just described to you, in which I have a negative cash-to-cash lead time, I need to have bargaining power. I need to have bargaining power. I need to be a market leader. I need to be the firm focus, the focus firm within the supply chain, the leader firm within the supply chain. Otherwise, if I am not in the strongest part of the bargaining power relation, I will be actually subject of bargaining power of others. I will need to, in order to keep my business running, I need to fit to customers or to suppliers requirements, including payment terms. Okay, let's imagine, for example, that we are a supplier here, and we are making assessment on if we can get better our cash-to-cash lead time. Let's imagine that we have several suppliers competing with ourselves, so intensity of rivalry is high in our industry. We have several competitors, and we serve a small market formed by few firms and big firms. They are few and they are large corporations. So those guys here, they can choose ourselves as supplier, or they can choose everybody else, because the intensity of the rivalry in the industry is high, because we have several suppliers capable to offer this product that this buyer buys to him. If the scenario is that this guy here can establish rules to the supplier network, saying, hey guys, you want to provide me the goods that I need? No problem. I need good price, I need good payment term, and I need good lead time. Lead time from the buyer perspective. I need you to deliver me the product fast, and I need you to be available to receive the payment in long term. Because the bargaining power is all in his hand. Bargaining power is all in his hand. He can determine how they will work. If ourselves as one supplier of this network doesn't accept that, if we don't accept that, actually, this guy has the option to buy from someone else, because the intensity of rivalry is high. This is high because the number of suppliers is big. And the bargaining power can be even more in the hands of the buyer, for example, if we have, in addition to a number of suppliers, we have potential new entrants. So we have firms that are interested in entering in our business, or in other words, to become our rival in this industry. And the bargaining power is even more in the buyer's hand if this industry here suffers threat of substitutes. So if the goods that this buyer buy can be replaced to another good with no impact to his process production business. So all of those forces, 5 forces: intensity of rivalry, threat of substitutes, bargaining power of buyers, threat of new entrants, and bargaining power of suppliers, those 5 forces are named 5 forces, competitive forces of Porter, or elements of industry structure. Those 5 forces actually will determine how each of the firms that are part of the supply chain will behave. And ultimately, those 5 forces will determine cash-to-cash lead time among them. So this is a very clear link between supply chain management, procurement, cash management, finance, and business strategy. Here I have one example just to illustrate the concept of cash-to-cash lead time for you. See this supply chain here, a simple supply chain. I've mentioned this a couple of minutes ago, but just to show you the image. Let's imagine that we have a farmer here, small farmer that produces lettuce, or onions, and several others, vegetables and fruits. This guy here, in order to seed, in order to plant, need to buy inputs for production, like seeds, like fertilizers, like whatever. Okay. Well, he's small. Suppliers are big. They are big firms that work in agribusiness. So, those firms, those suppliers, they sell to this small farmer, but they always ask prompt payment or payment in advance from this guy. So in order to get inputs from this guy here, this farmer needs to pay cash, prompt payment, or even in advance. Let's imagine that the disbursement here occurs in TD plus 0. In D plus 30, he has the goods ready to be sold and shipped. Okay, let's imagine that this farmer here at D30 has conditions to sell and ship the product. But these guys, the retailer, they say, hey, I want to receive this product now, D30, but I will pay you 30 days to 60 days after inbound delivery, after I receive the product. So let's imagine it's 60 days after delivery. Farmer is delivering the same day he's saying that the product is available. So farmer is delivering in D plus 30, but this guy is paying in D plus 90. 60 days from here, 90 days from here. So remark, this guy here has a cash mismatch of 90 days between disbursement of cash disbursement for paying suppliers and cash inflow. 90 days mismatch. And I'm not considering here all the costs that he has in a daily basis, like water, like energy, like other inputs, like payments to workers, etc. So this guy is in a very weak position, because the bargaining power is definitely not in his hand. The bargaining power is in the supplier's hand and in the retailer's hand. That's the trouble, guys. But look, if this guy is in trouble because the cash-to-cash lead time to him is terrible, those guys here know that, and they are aware that this situation, the cash-to-cash situation for this guy is not good, because the business policy that they implement, they know that this situation is good for them, it's good for the retailer, it's good for the supplier, but at the same time, they know that if they keep this situation for a long period of time, at some moment in the future, at some point in the future, they can have the supplier, this farmer, leaving the business, because it's so hard to him to support this long cash-to-cash lead time that eventually he will go to bankruptcy and will leave the business. Neither the retailer nor the supplier want this guy leaving the business. They want this guy to be here over time. For this type of situation, we're going to discuss solutions in the next classes available in the Brazilian banking and Brazilian capital markets. I'll not get into the solutions now, otherwise I will be bringing discussions that we will have in the near future to these. What I want to understand here now is that this type of situation is very, very common. And this type of cash tightness can kill agents within the supply chain. This situation, guys, this type of situation, this type of business strategy, cash-to-cash strategy, has a direct reflection in the financial statements of the firm. It has direct impact on the financial statements of a certain firm. Before making the assessment, or before making the link between cash-to-cash lead time and financial statements, let's understand, this is not an accounting class, I'm not accountant, so it's just a very brief view on what is the financial statements, bringing or giving, shedding light on balance sheet and income statement. Let's try to understand what is balance sheet and income statement. What is balance sheet? Balance sheet is a snapshot of assets and liabilities at a certain moment. So if I have a balance sheet issued in December 31st, 2020, this balance sheet brings me the position of the firm in terms of assets and liabilities at or on December 31st, 2020. If a firm bought, for example, a warehouse at December 30, 2020, this warehouse will appear in the balance sheet. Or better, let's imagine that a firm bought a warehouse in December 29th and sold the same warehouse in December 30th. In the balance sheet issued in December 31st, this warehouse will not appear in the balance sheet. The balance sheet doesn't tell us the history of what happened during the year or during the semester or during the quarter. The balance sheet brings us a snapshot of the assets and liabilities at that moment. This is something like that. This is a balance sheet. This is a balance sheet. We can understand that balance sheet is divided into assets and liabilities. Liabilities is subdivided between liabilities and net worth, patrimônio líquido. Assets are divided in current assets, short-term assets, or assets that have high liquidity, capacity to be sold within 1 year, capacity to be converted into cash within the period of 1 year, and non-current assets, which are assets that are not possible or is unlikely to be converted into cash within 1 year. We need to have more than 1 year to convert non-current assets into cash. Liabilities is the same thing. We have current liabilities, the same concept of current assets, and we have non-current liabilities, same concept as non-current assets. Here we have an example of balance sheet, a real example. Let's get end of fiscal year 2017. We have assets and we have liabilities and shareholders' equity or net worth. Assets are divided into current assets, fixed assets, and intangible assets, and also other assets. We can understand that these three type of assets, fixed assets, intangible assets, and other assets are non-current assets. And current assets, as the name says, are liquid, more liquid assets. Indeed, they are. Look, as current assets, we have cash, we have receivables, we have inventory, we have other current assets. Can you guys help me to understand what is receivables? What is receivables?
Is the amount of money that you are supposed to receive from your customers.
Sorry, can you say again? Because I just noticed that That has
Okay.
not working yet.
So basically it's the amount of money that your customers own to you that you're supposed to receive in the future.
Exactly. Exactly. This is the concept of receivable. It's a due payment to be made in the future. So remark, if I have a long cash to cash lead time, probably I will have high number of receivables, right? That farmer that we just presented 2 minutes ago, he would have a bunch of receivables because he always gets paid 60 to 90 days after shipping the goods. So he is full of receivables and empty of cash, probably, that farmer, as he gets payment always or most part of the times at term. Look how cash to cash lead time impacts firm's balance sheet. Look, if I have this situation, if I have a high level of receivables are not money, right? Receivables is a promise to receive cash in the future. This is not money. I didn't have, although I had the receivables here as asset in my balance sheet, receivables are not cash in hands. It's not cash in hands. Well, if I don't have cash in hands, if my receivables are too high, I need cash to run my costs, right? I need cash to pay my costs. I don't pay the salary of my employees, for example, with receivable. I cannot give you guys, if you are my, let's say that I am the owner of a business and you guys work for me. Let's imagine, or let's imagine the opposite. I work for you. Actually, it's the real situation. Let's say that you want to pay me, you need to pay me because I work for you and this is payday. It's impossible to imagine that you say to me, hey Daniel, I don't have cash because I sell a lot at term, and because I don't have cash in hands now, I will pay you with receivables from the customer A, B, and C. I'll give you the contract that I have with them as payment. And then I say, but this is not money. It's impossible, right? It's impossible to pay the current costs with receivables. Although receivables are considered revenues in the income statement that you're gonna see in a few minutes, this is not cash in hands. So if I don't have cash in hands because my cash to cash lead time is bad, what I need to have, I need to have liabilities. I need to have, for example, debit to have an injection of money, of cash in my hand to pay my costs. In other words, if I have high level of receivables and low level of cash, I need to go to the bank and make credit operations in order to get money. This is the most traditional way, right, for a firm to get cash through debit, dívida. But if I do that, I will pay the interest rate, the expenses, the financial expenses related to this operation. All of these because I have a long-term, long cash-to-cash lead time. Because of that, my boss in that time, when I was very young as trainee, used to say, the secret of any business is, he wanted to say that, but he said another way, but he wanted to say, is a negative cash-to-cash lead time. Negative cash-to-cash lead time. with a negative cash-to-cash lead time, I will always have cash, and ultimately I will have low necessity or any necessity of debit. Okay. Another aspect that is important to highlight here for you is that property, plant, and equipment, known as PP and E in English, PP&E, are fixed assets. They are very long-term assets. If I want to sell a warehouse, a apartment, a house, I will not convert that asset into cash from one day to another, right? I need to announce that I am selling that warehouse, that house, that apartment, and I need to wait days, weeks, months, even years to sell that, to convert that into cash. So having high level of fixed assets also will make me to need debit from banks or shareholder equity. Someone will need to give me money, cash, to pay my costs. This money can come from banks through debit, or can come from shareholders, equity. Shareholders a port of cash. Okay. All right. But this is balance sheet, the picture of a certain moment. In addition to balance sheet, we have other important financial statements, which is the income statement. Differently from balance sheet, this is not a snapshot of a certain moment. This is type of a book, it's type of a report that brings me information on how that business, that firm, that organization performed over a period of time. For example, if the income statement is issued in December 31st, 2020, this tells me how was the performance of that firm over the last 12 months, from January to December 31st. What were the revenues? What were the costs? What were the expenses? What were the gross margin? What was the operational profit, EBIT? What was the EBITDA? What was the net profit, P&L? Income statements tells me the history of the performance over that period of time. Okay. So look, this is an income statement. Net sales of 100 million. $100 million, or actually $100 billion. This firm had a net sale of $100 billion. Means that $100 billion cash entered in our pockets, in firm's pocket. This is cash inflow? No. This is revenue. This is accounting revenue. This is the amount of money that the firm invoiced. But remember, this firm can sell to get the payment at term. This firm could have offered term to the customers. This firm recognizes the revenue in the moment it invoices, it issues nota fiscal, although this firm will get the money from the sale just a number of days or weeks or months after. This is not cash inflow. This is a recognition of revenue. If I sell a lot at term, I will probably have a very good net sales, net revenue, but I will have, on the other hand, a bunch of receivables. That is not cash. You still need debit or shareholders' equity to finance my operation. A firm needs to sell at term if this is not having full bargaining power against the customers. No one wants to finance nobody. Any firm wants to finance anybody in the supply chain. Everybody wants to get cash. Firms finance customers or suppliers because they need to leverage sales, they need to leverage margins, they need to establish their position within the supply chain, within the industry. This is why firms sell at term. Well, if I sell a lot at term and I need to raise money through debit with a bank, I will have impact here in the interest expenses, juros. So if I need to leverage, if I need to be leveraged, if I need to raise money with banks through debit, I will pay interest rate to these banks. And of course, I will have a higher expense here in my income statement. In my income statement. This high level of interest rate will result in a net profit that might be impacted by this high level of interest rate. If I don't get money with banks, so I don't pay interest rate, but I need to get money from someone else, for example, from my shareholders, I will not pay interest rate, but I will pay dividends, which is the same thing. It's cost that flows from my result. Conclusion, guys. Accounting results and cash position are not the same thing. Net revenue is different from cash in the balance sheet. If I'm not in a position, in a good position in my supply chain, if I don't have full or strong bargaining power against my suppliers or my customers, probably I will need to work with payment term, and then I will have a high level of receivables or payables. In the case I have the bargaining power, receivables if in the case I don't have. And if I have high level of receivables, I need to finance my operation. I need to finance my operation. I need to raise money to keep running my operation. And how guys, traditionally speaking, we raise money to support to make infusion of cash here in this line to keep paying my costs. The traditional sources of cash are debit and equity, dívida and equity. Dívida is when I raise money in banks. Equity is when I raise money with shareholders. From a cost perspective, guys, from a cost perspective, what's the difference between debit and equity? Who could help me on this? What's the difference from a cost perspective, from debit to equity? No one?
Professor,
Go ahead.
debt comes from borrowing money, whereas equity comes from investors.
Say again, sorry.
Debt comes from borrowing money, whereas equity comes from investors.
Yeah, but from a cost perspective, Gabriel, what would be the difference when I
It
get
means
money?
that you can choose, you have more negotiating power to choose when and how you pay back equity than debt, because debt, it's probably going to be the bank that's going to be setting, oh, you have this interest rate till this day. Whereas equity, if you're speaking about shareholders, for example, the payment that you're going to make to them is going to be on your net profit. So you need to already have cash in hand to pay equity, whereas that it doesn't really matter if you have cash in hand or not.
Yeah, your rationale is right, but I would add the following. I would add the following. When I raise money through debit, through debt in a bank, I'll pay a flat interest rate. So, I mean, no matter if my operation will have profit or not, I will pay at the end of the period a X% of interest rate, 10% interest rate. If the bank is lending money $100,000 at 6% per year interest rate over 1 year, I will pay at the end of this period the principal $100,000 plus 6% interest rate. Even if I had losses in my operation, it's flat. And the contrary is true. If I have a huge profit, like 30% net profit, I will keep paying 6% interest rate to the bank. The bank's not participating in the profit and in the losses. On the other hand, when we have, or when we are raising money through equity, then the shareholder is running at full risks and benefits of the operation. If the operation gives profit, the shareholder will get the dividends exactly in the proportion of the profit. 20% profit, shareholder will get 20% addition to what he put as equity in the operation. But the opposite is true. If the business run at loss, lose money over the period of a period during a period of 1 year, for example, 20% loss, then the shareholder will lose part of the principal he put in the business. He's running risks and profits of the business. This is the difference. So the cost of equity can be higher than interest rate paid to the bank, or can be very lower than the interest rate that the firm is paying to the bank, depending on how the performance of the firm is in that period. Okay. But look, debt and equity are traditional sources of cash. If we remember that small farmer here, eventually equity he doesn't have. He is the sole owner of his business. And eventually he can go to the bank, and the bank says, hey, I can't offer you any loan, or if I offer you a loan, it's gonna be at a very high level of interest rate, because your business is risky, because you don't have any collateral to offer me, because agricultural risk is very sensitive for me, because you are very small. So because all of these, bank can say, I will not provide you any loan, or if I provide you, it's gonna be at a very high level of interest rate, because my perception of risk is very high. So this guy is in a very, very bad situation, because cash to cash lead time for him is terrible. It's terrible. And he is not capable to get any loan with the bank or through equity. He is not accessing traditional sources of cash. It is in this, and remember, those guys here, the buyer and supplier, they are not for them, it is important to have this guy with financial health, although they want to have their balance sheet very liquid and very healthy. They want this guy as well having condition to provide products and to buy from the supplier. Otherwise, the supply chain will not work properly. So guys, it is in scenarios like that in which I have not easy access to debt and equity, that we have solutions related to supply chain finance. What is supply chain finance? Supply chain finance are solutions that are focused on cash and information flows among multiple stakeholders of a supply chain. Supply chain finance is the financing of the supply chain using not traditional sources of cash inflow. With supply chain finance solutions, we put together financial service providers, which can be banks or others. We're gonna see these in detail in the next classes. We put together suppliers and we put together buyers. We engineer those three main characters to finance the whole supply chain, or to provide supply chain with liquidity. Okay. Here in Brazil, as I said, we have very interesting solutions of supply chain finance. and we're gonna see some of them. We're gonna see some of them in the next class, starting in the next class. Was that understandable for you guys? It was, could you understand? Do you have any doubt on what I explained to you up to now? Is that fine?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's okay.
Yes, Professor, all good.
Okay, okay.
Professor, can I ask something?
Of course, Lucas. Go ahead.
You said if your net margin is greater than the amount you pay for to get loans, it is greater than the what do you say, the interest rates you pay to get loans from banks. It's better to be leveraged than to have more investors in the business, right?
Lucas, say again. Unfortunately, let me try to get the headphone because your voice is very low. for
Okay.
me.
No problem.
Hold a minute, just a minute. Can you say again, Lucas, just to see if I'm hearing through?
Okay.
No.
Yeah. You said that it's better to be leveraged when your net margin is greater than the interest rates you pay to get money, right?
It's bad for me to hear. Hold on a minute, just 1 minute. Now I guess it's gonna work. Say again, Lucas, please. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
You said that if the interest rate you pay for loans from banks is greater than your net margin, it's worse for you to be leveraged, right?
And not actually. In both scenarios, when I leverage money, when I get money from debt or via debt through debt in a bank, I will pay interest rates. The level of interest rates, if these interest rates are very high, let me get back here to the here. Here. Look, if I let's first discuss leverage via through debt when I borrow money from a bank. The interest rates will appear here in the interest expenses. Okay. My point at that time was if I raise a lot of money through debt, getting money from banks at high interest rate, eventually these expenses will be so high that will harm my net income. When I raise money via equity, the shareholder is running the risk of the business with me. So let's say that the shareholder one shareholder apports $1,000 in my business. At the end of the period, I had a net income of, let's say, 10%. This shareholder will get 100K plus 10K. 10% on what he apported.
Yeah.
Okay. But let's imagine other situation here. The shareholder put 100K US in our business as equity here. But our profit was, instead of 10% positive, was 10% negative. We lose, or we lost 10%. We had a net profit equivalent of 10% of our net sales. In this case, this guy will get 90K USD back. He's gonna lose 10% of what he applied in this business because he's running performance risk with us. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah. I was just wondering if, like, for example, the usually the interest rate you pay for debt is bigger if you have more debt compared to equity, right?
Oh yeah, of course. Oh yeah. If I have, let's say, if I am highly indebted, then we need to check our balance sheet. What you're saying is that, let's say that I have debt due for repayment, current liabilities, and long-term debt at very high levels. Well, if I have a high level of indebtedness, the money that I will raise, additional new money that I will raise at the banks, probably will be higher in terms of interest rate, because the perception of risk of the bank is higher. He sees that we are highly indebted. We are in a high level of indebtedness. And because of that, he can provide us a new loan, but the cost of this new loan will be probably higher than the others ones. We have several metrics to measure the liquidity of the firm, etc. There is some banks and some credit analysts consider that when we have total debt 4 times or plus over the EBITDA, when I have total debt which are 4 times higher than my EBITDA, this firm is very highly, strongly high, with a strong high level of indebtedness. Some banks, they don't provide any additional money when we have levels of this, like this. This varies from bank to bank, from provider to provider, but generally speaking, this is a metric
Got it.
that you can follow.
Thanks, Professor.
No problem. Any other question, guys?
No, Professor, thank you.
Let me just make the check presence here, and then you are free for today, guys. Just a minute. I'm sorry for the headphone. I don't know what happened. Actually, I know what happened. I thought it was fully charged and the plug didn't work. And this is bad for me. I can hear you. I'm not able to hear you well with the sound that comes from the laptop. For me, it's better when I use the headset. Anyway. André Frangipani,
Here, Professor.
Arthur. Arthur. Bruna. Bruna. Bruno Capinelli. Bruno Capinelli. Bruno Henrique.
Here I am, Professor.
Morning. Camila Freitas.
Here.
Carolina.
Here, Professor.
Cristiano.
Hi, I'm here.
Diego.
Hi, I'm here.
Great. Diego.
Sorry, Professor, did you hear me? It's Carolina here.
Carolina. No, Carolina, I didn't. Let me. Okay. Cristiano. Diego.
Present, Professor.
Great. Fernando. Fernando. Gabriel.
Here.
Gustavo.
I'm also here.
Hector.
Here, Professor.
Isabela.
Here.
Jenny. Jenny. No. Jenny Kain Shu. No.
Professor, my internet just I just came back from, my internet just fall down. My name is Arthur.
Okay. No problem. Juliana.
Here, Professor.
Lucas. Perdão, Lucas Alexandre.
Hello, Professor.
Lucas Botino.
Here.
Ok, Lucas. Maria de Carvalho.
Here, Professor.
Ok. Maria Eugênia. Maria Eugênia.
I'm here. I'm here.
Maria Luísa.
Here, Professor.
Ok. Marina.
Here, Professor.
Mário.
Hi, how you doing?
E Mário. Matheus. Matheus Barros.
Here, Professor.
Matheus Guedes. Matheus Guedes. Rafael.
Here, Professor.
Renan.
Here, Professor.
Roberto.
Here, Professor.
Victor. Victor. And William. William. No. Okay, guys. Thanks for your time. Have a very great week. And see you next week. See you next Tuesday.
Professor, did you get my message?
Bye-bye, Professor.
Bye-bye, folks.
Bye, Professor.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Professor.
Professor,
Yeah.
this is Carolina. I don't remember if you got my name or not. It's just that
Yeah. I
don't.
got you, Carolina. No problem.
Oh, so that's okay. So bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Did
See
you
you
get
next week.
my name?
You too, Arthur. I got you.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.